you so much for keeping it here on Morning at NTV. Stephen Imbido Fefeswe Chibuga, still coming to you from Buate. And this is a discussion that is on the power distribution that is after the exit of UMEME. That is in 2025 in March. Government has already indicated that they will not be renewing the concession with UMEME. But all along, the president has been blaming, on most cases, politicians right from the 6th Parliament for being the cause for the fluctuations that we see in the power generation distribution. Of course, now that UMEME is exiting 2025, will government stick by this? That's why I'm here to speak to the executive director of AFIEGO, Africa Institute for Energy Governance, Dickens Kamugisha. He has been on the front line on issues of power generation distribution and everything. Dickens, for a domestic and industrial user, wants to have stable supply of power and at a cheaper price or charges. What do you make of the decision that government will not renew the concession with UMEME?
Yeah, Stephen, thanks very much. I think we all need to appreciate that electricity sector all over the world is a very scientific sector, and you need to be sure, you need to have scientific evidence for each and every decision that you make. So the decision by government to say they don't want to renew the concession of UMEME after 2025, in my opinion, we can only celebrate if the government was showing us scientific evidence that they have done an audit on the performance of UMEME, they have done an audit on all the actors in the sector, because UMEME has been doing the distribution. Almost 98% of the distribution network has been with UMEME for almost now over 20 years. So in other words, they have played a big role. You cannot discard them and say they are useless. They have done some part. They have failed in many areas, but Ugandans would want to have scientific evidence to know how they have delivered, where they have failed, why they have failed, and if we decide not to allow them to continue, the ones that are going to come later, how are they going to address the problems that we have discovered in the audit? And unfortunately, right now, we don't know. And I need to tell you that about 10 years ago, the Salim Sale Committee did investigate and came up with recommendations. They were ignored on UMEME. About 4 years ago, the president made a directive to Minister of Energy and Inspector General of Government to investigate UMEME, investigate Bujagari, the people who did the Bujagari contract, and come up with recommendations. That investigation was not done. We know Parliament also investigated UMEME and came up with recommendations. The government ignored them. So we can't even be sure that the government is going to effect what they are saying, that they will not renew the concession. So of
that means it could also walk back on its decision and it still renew the concession?
Yes, as I said, if you don't do investigations, you don't generate evidence to inform your decision, you can't be sure that government is going to effect what they are saying. In any case, we've been engaging government on the kind of decision they are making, because since 1999, when the first Electricity Act was put in place, we've seen government creating a number of companies: Uganda Electricity Generation Company, Uganda Electricity Transmission Company, Uganda Electricity Distribution Company, you have the Electricity Regulatory Authority, you have Electrification Agency. All these agencies of government have been in place. All of them have never been audited to know how they were performed, whether they performed well, whether they failed, what failed them. All of a sudden, we have seen the government coming up and say they want to merge them. So how do you make those decisions in a sector that requires scientific evidence? So at the moment, we can't actually say 100% that what government is saying, they are sure of what they want to do. If you ask them, what happens after UMEME has exited? Is the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company ready? Does it have skills? When Isimba Dam was commissioned in 2019 and handed over to the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company, which is owned by government, after a few years, we saw the account were plunged into darkness, saying that someone touched the button that was not supposed to be touched. So in other words, whether you chase away UMEME, whether you do whatever, if you don't have scientific evidence to inform your decisions, you are going to get problems.
You know, these agencies you're talking about, generation, transmission, and the other one of electricity distribution, generation, I'm forgetting, and transmission. Once UMEME exits 2025, do you think there will not be a vacuum? And when government, at the time when government is talking about agency mergers, do you think that there will not be a vacuum for the consumers?
You see, the reason why we are suffering in Uganda, that you can have, in 2018, you had access to the grid, was around 24%. Then today it is around 19%. You have invested almost $400 million in electrification, but people don't have power. You are talking about vandalism. So when they were amending the Electricity Act this year, we asked the government, can you first do a thorough research to understand all the aspects of the electricity sector, whether it is distribution, whether it is transmission, whether it is generation, whether it is electrification, so that when you put the law that we are going to put in place should help us. We should have even seen that maybe we don't want to renew the concession of UMEME, so that when we are making the law, we actually factor in all those issues. And unfortunately, we just focused on vandalism. And yet, you may find the vandalism is caused by many other factors, not necessarily people just looking for small monies. You may find there are insiders in these companies who are fundraising those things because they know how to put them there, they know how to take them there very quickly without being known. So, at the end of the day, you will discover that all these companies, you can't be sure whether they have capacity or no capacity.
Okay. Yes. Dickens, as we wind up, what is your last message to Cabinet? Because I know Cabinet has to discuss this, and of course the shareholders of UMEME, but also everyone who is concerned, because everyone wants to, the industrialists, the domestic users, everyone is concerned about the stability and the charges of power.
No, for me, I think I would want to ask government and Cabinet to be extremely careful. We have, so right now we are investing over $1.7 billion in Karuma, over $560 million in Simba. We've invested over $400 million in the last 10 years, over $400 million in electrification, in free connections. We have built many dams across many small rivers across the country. We now have over 1,300 megawatts being generated. So the distribution, the transmission, the generation must be looked at as one segment of the electricity sector in Uganda, and every decision going to be made, whether it is the president, whether it is cabinet, must be based on clear scientific research. In other words, scientific evidence. If we continue making decisions based on politics, based on corruption, we are not going to save anything. It will not matter whether UMEME goes or stays. We are going to continue suffering because you cannot be increasing generation. You cannot be allocating 193 billion Uganda shillings in this financial year to pay for surplus power when Ugandans don't have electricity. People are vandalizing some of these equipments because they are not happy with the services of government.
Thank you so much. With that conversation from Dickens Kamugisha, Stephen Imbide, and Fefe Swechibuganayo, on behalf of the entire team, we say thank you and bye-bye. See you tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Now, the conversation he has just had is eminent to each one of us. Kubanga UMEME Bambi Mochi Sosiza. So even though the contract is coming to an end, Mwedeko, our power matters. You know, when it goes off in the entire community, the mood dampens, people go into depression. Do you think about that when that is happening? And then that gentleman has also made a submission in terms of budget. You're paying for surplus elsewhere, but here in Uganda, things are terrible. Anyway, they said we speak nicely about Uganda. Dear Uganda, I love my country so much.